The Influencer's Edge is brought to you by the Rapid Sales Accelerator. If you're ready to skyrocket your sales by 30% or more in just 90 days, then you need to claim your free training right now. You'll learn 4 words that will compel your prospects to trust you like they were children within the first 3 to 5 minutes of any conversation across any platform and any medium. You'll learn how to give your prospects objection amnesia, to crush objections like, I need to talk to my spouse, or I need more time to think it over, or it's too expensive. If you'd like to claim your free training now, go to www.paulrossbook.com. Do it before your competition does it now. Thank you for tuning in to the Influencer's Edge, where you get the latest breakthroughs, cutting-edge insights, tools, and techniques so you can leapfrog over the pack in sales, influence, and persuasion. Remember to visit our website at www.theinfluencersedge.com to enjoy even more great episodes like this one. We look forward to seeing you again on the Influencer's Edge Show. All right, welcome back to the Influencer's Edge. This is the show, say it with me, that colors outside the lines, disconnects the dots, and thinks outside the, that's right, box. And today our guest is the Honorable, well, you're not really a judge, but I'm just addressing you that way. I don't know why. Walter Crosby. Say hi to the folks watching and listening, Walter.
Hey, folks. How are you?
Walter, where are you joining us from today?
I am in the Mitten, the state of Michigan, outside of Detroit. The only state you can describe as an appendage. We look like the
So,
Mitten.
Walter, you have such a storied career with so many achievements. I scarce know where to begin, but what I will say is this, and we will put the link to your bio and the rest of it in the show's episode. What caught my attention first is that your rocket fuel comes from coaching committed individuals to experience beyond what they thought was possible. Conservatively, your clients see a 37 to 43% increase in revenue after their engagement. Now that is outrageous. I'm not saying that's incorrect, but that's outrageous. So many people would be happy to see a 10% interview increase. So if you were to say, first thing that I noticed is highly committed. What to you does highly committed mean? Because obviously you're screening the people you work with. If you're saying they're highly committed, you're not going to work with someone who's half-assed on their back foot.
That was what I was going to bring up. I think salespeople, entrepreneurs, I want to work with ones that want to grow, that are committed to that. It's a bumpy road. To grow. There's going to be gnashing of teeth. There's going to be people like we've never done that before, especially in the sales department, which is where I focus my attention. And I tell the entrepreneur, the CEO at the beginning, you're going to have people on your team that come to you and say, this guy's crazy. He wants us to actually follow a process. He actually wants us to practice. He wants us to work on and use the same kind of messaging. So if they're not committed, when that conversation comes up from their salespeople, they're going to struggle to make sure that we create that accountability, because salespeople need that structure, need that guidance. I know I did when I was in that producer seat for a long time.
Yeah, and that becomes really difficult when a salesperson just happens also to be a visionary. You would think that the CEO is the visionary, but sometimes salespeople are mavericks. They want to buck the saddle, so to speak, and you have to learn to ride herd on them. So that sounds to me like when you do your process of vetting a client, how do you go about telling whether they're a committed team or whether they're half-assed? And what's your process or procedure, if you don't mind me asking that?
So we do an analysis. I call it a gap analysis of the individuals on the team, whether that's a sales leader, sales manager, and the sales people. the people on the front line. So we can look at it and understand their strengths and their weaknesses. And what we really are looking for is how that group think about sales and what they're afraid of. Because most of what we work on is mindset. And it's I make the analogy all the time. The longest distance on a golf course is the 8 inches between our ears. And it's the same thing
I
in
love that.
sales. It's the same thing in sales, right? If we get over the ball and stand there for 27 seconds and our arms get all short and tight and we just can't fully swing and relax. So in a sales context, do they need their prospects to like them? Do they need them to love them, right? That can be a big problem. We want to earn respect. Can they talk about money? Um, it's all the things that we were taught as a kid. Like, don't talk to strangers and don't talk about money and don't ask a lot of questions because that's rude. Well, and then we grow up and some of us become salespeople. And what do we got to do? Go ask people a lot of questions, talk about money, and, talk to strangers, push back, be skeptical.
Pushing
So
back. Now, you just said something that's gold. The idea that you push back on someone and that
mm,
so many people think of sales as being only about being agreeable and seeking rapport, but sometimes you have to break patterns. You have to interrupt patterns and push back on the client.
most of the time. So we talked
Unpack
about that really at the beginning. If I'm talking to a business owner and they want different results and they're not willing to try something different, if they're not willing to look at the problem from a different perspective, then we're gonna struggle. So I'm gonna push back. I call it skepticism. So I want my salespeople to be curious. I want them to be skeptical so they can, when somebody says something, they can come back with a line that's like, I'm confused. You said X, but they also said Y. Which which one of those things are important? And then start to unpack those questions so that they start to uncover for themselves as a prospect that there's a conflict there and maybe they need to get out of their own way. We can't tell them they're wrong. We can't tell them that's a huge mistake, but we can ask questions so they start to uncover what the challenges are that they might be creating for themselves.
Can you unpack that and give us a specific example of just if you could reach into your imagination or conceptual part of your mind and bring this down to earth with a specific question or two you would ask to to push back against the client or a prospect?
So if I have this conversation happens a lot with a salesperson. So like we could get into a coaching situation where we know that that salesperson wants to be liked by everybody. And we all need to be liked, right, as humans. But when it comes to sales in that particular role, we need to be likable and we need to earn respect. So, how do we earn respect? We ask questions, we ask good questions, we ask tough questions. So, so we can, as a salesperson, like I can't ask a tough question because then that'll make my prospect upset.
Can you give me
Well,
a here's what I'm trying to drill down into. Forgive me for interrupting. It's I don't mean any disrespect. Can you give
hmm,
me an example, a specific kind of question that's a pushback and would earn some respect, but it's pushing back on the client? I mean, you did give one. You well, before you said X and now you're saying Y, which is it? That was one example. Can you give us
hmm.
another one?
So so if we're talking about with an entrepreneur that we want everybody to be happy, we want everybody to get along because our culture is such. But you want your salespeople to go out and be effective. So what we have to be able to do in that situation is get that entrepreneur to realize that they need to change their perspective. So I would ask questions about So you're happy with the results that you're getting. Well, no, I'm not happy with the results. That's why we're talking. Like, oh, so how do we get this headed in a direction where you're open to trying something different that walks down a different path? Because I get them to see that I'm looking at the same problem from the same perspective that they are. We're walking down the same path, but my perspective has a different set of experiences with it. So I need to challenge them about what they're seeing. That could be about the cost of a product. Like, well, wow, that's a lot of money. Okay, well, is it a lot of money in relation to, right? And so we have to look at what's this problem costing them. So we have to push back on this idea. We never, when it comes to price, a salesperson shouldn't be defending their price. They
Never.
should they should be saying something like, yeah, this is expensive. But we talked about earlier that this problem is costing you $500,000 a quarter. And we're looking at spending $25,000 for a 6-month program to solve that problem. Help me understand what I'm missing. If we can
I love
solve,
that. I love
if we
that. Wait,
can,
wait. Help me understand what I'm missing. I like that question.
and it's a little bit in your face for some people, but you can say whatever you want to a prospect as long as you say it in a nurturing fashion, right? So we can't just come out and call somebody like that's dumb. We can't do that. But we can challenge their thinking and help them start to see things from that other perspective. And that's really about just being skeptical, especially when they do say something that's really, really dumb, right? That doesn't,
And
it
that's not
contradicts.
uncommon. That's not that uncommon.
It is very common because they're trying to figure something out that they haven't figured out for a long time. So part of the discovery, the questions that we're asking, how long is this a problem? What have you tried? Did that work? What else have you tried? How did that work? Well, that almost worked, but what do you think was missing, right? So we're going to unravel this and unpack it, just like what you were doing with me. You were trying to get me to answer a question and give a specific example. You were trying to unpack things. It's exactly the same thing in sales. We're just interviewing somebody. We're asking questions to dive a little bit deeper.
Now, here's the distinction. There's a distinction between interviewing and interrogating. So
Mm.
how do you do this? There's an art form, there's a distinction, there's a subtlety between interviewing and interrogating. So how do you advise? I mean, you can't just bombard with questions. And what
You can't. Yeah. So the way to think about that, I think the simplest way is that you're having a conversation. That's all you're doing is having a conversation if your intent is to help the person. So in an interrogation, you're usually trying to get somebody to slip up and say something. And there's usually some authority figure with, we think about police and somebody that's done something wrong, a potential criminal. And they're interrogating them by asking a lot of questions, but there's this perceived authority and there's this situation where there's a problem. We're sitting in a dark room with a light on us. But when we're in a situation where we're having a conversation with our prospect, it's not unlike your friend that calls you up and says, "Hey, Paul, I got a problem, and I want to. Can we get together and talk? Have a beer, have coffee, and talk about something that's going on." So as a friend, you're going to come to that person and ask them questions like, "Why did you say that? You really said that to her? Holy crap!" And she didn't punch you in the mouth, right? I'm just thinking about a conversation I had with a friend, and so it's conversational. All of the questions need to sound natural. They need to flow. So here's the big piece that we miss is that we're not listening to the prospect, right? We have to ask a question and not work off of a script. We have to ask the question and listen and then work off of their answer. And if we're listening to what they're saying, actively listening, then we should be able to have a response to know either we can help this person or we can't. We need
And
to
it's
shift
really
their
important
mindset or we
and
can't.
it's really important to say that. Say, you know what? We're not a good fit. I just don't think I can help you. Let me refer you to someone who may be a better fit. That actually is true. When you come from that truth and say, look, before we even get going here, I don't know that we're a right fit. My whole intention here is to just have a conversation and discover whether that's the case. And then all the ways that moving forward would really help you. And so that's my full intent here. And if it turns out we're not a good fit, I'll refer you out if I can.
Yeah, at the beginning of the conversation, to speak to exactly what you're saying, we're going to ask each other some questions here. And the goal of this conversation is to determine if we should keep talking, right? If there is an opportunity for me to help you. If I can't bring you value, I want to be the first person out, right? I'm going to tell you that. But you have to have the intent as a salesperson to want to help, not sell, not pitch, right? We want to be able to help this person. And I've gone into
I'm
conversations where somebody had a huge problem that I couldn't help them, and they had a smaller problem that I could. And I'm like, sir, you gotta go solve that $500,000 problem every quarter before you solve my little $10,000 a month problem, right? So I know a guy. I'll introduce you. Maybe he can help you. I'm not going anywhere. Solve that big problem, and then we'll come back together. And it creates credibility
It's a
when
nice
you,
pattern interrupt too. They're expecting something else.
yeah. But
I want to
but
ask you. I want to ask you about your book. It's sitting there behind you over your left shoulder, and
mhm.
I can barely. Would it be too much to ask if you could just grab it and show it to the camera? I seldom get a note of that. So scale your sales. Let's talk about that because scaling is a word that's thrown around so much, particularly, I'm not saying this applies to you, Walter. I'm really not.
Mhm.
By internet marketers. Oh, we'll show you how to scale your business in 6 months to $1 million, or you don't pay us and we'll give you $1,000 for your problem. So if I came to you and said, look, I only have focus for two things I can do to scale my business beyond having the right team. And I'm just going to put words in my own mouth, not yours. Right now, we're working on something major to scale my business, and I couldn't do this without the right team. I just couldn't. I would be sunk. Beyond that, if you could give us one or two things, because we only have a limited amount of time, I'm sure you could do a whole weekend on this. What would you say are two things well, you probably could. What are two things that people could do to scale their business,
So
scale
I
their
think
sales?
there's the book talks about seven big mistakes, and if we're going to assume we need to have the right team as part of that, right? And I think that's a people is a big component. I think what entrepreneurs and business owners take for granted is that they have this clear vision in their head and they know what they're trying to do. They know what the mission is. They know what the solution is. They know how to explain all of this to a prospect, but they don't translate that vision to the individual. So if you think about an organization, the guy um, the shipping department, he needs to understand that vision in a sense as to what he can do every day, every week to fulfill that vision. And that usually is something that is missed. They talk about this grandiose vision. They have a VTO if they're EOS company. They're
What's a
clear about it.
VTO? Let's unpack that acronym.
So entrepreneurial operating system, the companies that use that to operate their business, they have a VTO, which is their vision traction, their main objective as a company,
Got it.
right? So it's really what defines their vision, and it's why they're running a business and what they're trying to accomplish in the community in the world. And that's great. And they usually have that talked about every day and it's in all of their meetings. But if they don't help the individual employee understand what they can do to help that goal become reality at their level of function, there's a big gap. I'll give you a quick example. I once had I had a big project that was going out. The shipping guy was shipping out these boxes. There was probably 20 boxes of product. And he called me up and said, "Hey, I'm shipping out 19 of the 20. The 20th box had a damage to it. I opened it up and I saw there was some of the product was damaged. So I held it back. I'll ship it out tomorrow." I'm like, "All right, Gary, appreciate it. Thank you." So I called the customer and I said, "Look, you're going to get all of this except for the one box. You got enough to get going. I'll bring you out the rest." And they're like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah. Well, normally people would just ship out the whole order and let the stuff sort itself out." So that individual knew that it was the right thing to do to not ship it, to hold it back, fix it, and then ship it so that there wasn't this back and forth and an upset customer. That customer was so appreciative that that level of function, a shipping clerk, made a decision that helped out everybody. And so when they came in the next time to see us, they brought him a bunch of swag and, rewarded him for his, but he was clear as to that was his job to make sure good quality product made it to our customer. Right. And then he took the other step to communicate that to me so I could get in front of it and help the customer know they were going to get 19 out of 20. Right.
We're almost, I'm sorry to interrupt. If you can finish that answer, and then we're almost out of time. My apologies, sir. Please continue.
Sorry. So I think that's a big component, and then of making sure the vision's all the way communicated to the company. And then if you're going to have a great team, you don't have a process for them to take a buyer through the journey that you're going to bring a buyer through your organization. If that isn't clear, steps, stages, milestones, right?
It's a mess.
So that it's yeah, you're going to have 5 people doing things 6 different ways, and there's lack of consistency. Your brand suffers, the process suffers, you lose opportunities. Those are 2 big ones.
Before we go, I love the name of your podcast, which is Sales and Cigars. Are you a cigar smoker, or where did that come from?
2 passions, right? Sales is something that we talk about, and cigars, like I'm sitting in my cigar lounge in my barn. So normally I have 3 or 4 cigars a day. So I integrated 2 things I love into one endeavor.
Do you smoke on the air? Do you puff away on the stogie when you're doing your show?
There's one sitting right here next to me.
Okay,
So yes.
Genuine Cuban leaf. My ops manager loves cigars. That's his thing. All right, the audience is going to want to stay in the conversation with you. We will absolutely put it in the show notes. All the links, the link to, if you have an Amazon link to your book, is it on Amazon? Make sure your producer gives that to us and to my producer.
Yep.
And we'll make sure. What is the best way for them to stay in the conversation with you?
The easiest thing for them to connect with me is LinkedIn. Walter Crosby on LinkedIn. It's a great way for them to understand how I think. They can kind of pay attention to things I post. It's easy to reach out on LinkedIn. Non-threatening.
All right. Thank you, sir. My producer will be in touch as to when this is going to air. Thank you for your time. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, a fantastic interview on the Influencer's Edge, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you, Walter.
Thank you.
Bye now.
The Influencer's Edge is brought to you by the Rapid Sales Accelerator. If you're ready to skyrocket your sales by 30% or more in just 90 days, then you need to claim your free training right now. You'll learn 4 words that will compel your prospects to trust you like they were children within the first 3 to 5 minutes of any conversation across any platform in any medium. You'll learn how to give your prospects objection amnesia, to crush objections like, I need to talk to my spouse, or I need more time to think it over, or it's too expensive. If you'd like to claim your free training now, go to www.paulrossbook.com. Do it before your competition does it now. Welcome to the Influencer's Edge, This is the place where you come to get the latest breakthroughs, cutting-edge insights, tools, and techniques to leapfrog over the pack in sales, persuasion, and influence. Be sure you visit our website at www.theinfluencersedge.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now sit back, tune in, and enjoy today's episode.